Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 28 of the JD Outdoors podcast. Follow me on Instagram at JD_outdoors1773. My guest today will be fishing guide Ryan Shea. You can follow him on Instagram and social media at BrookDogFly. Today, we'll be talking about fishing for multi-species. So, as a guide, he fishes for just about everything under the sun. So we'll dabble a little bit in that. So how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Glad to be talking to you.
Always a good day to be talking fishing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to give us a little background on your fishing career, how and when you started? Obviously, you've got a pretty unique story.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll try to keep it interesting. So my first vivid memory of fishing is when my mom's father, so my grandfather, took me fishing when I was 4 off of a dock. He lived in Niagara Falls, like on Cug Island over there
Okay.
on East River. And he had a dock. I just remember a willow tree, and I remember catching a sunfish and thinking it was kind of crazy. And then I just got really into it. It was like he started it, and then I just kind of went from there and did it all on my own and did a lot of discovery learning. And then I met, my really close friend. I really just consider him a brother, Nate Carr, at a young age too. I think we were like 8, and then we just kept fishing and I just kept it up, man. I never stopped, and it was always a dream when I was a kid to become a fishing guide. So that was always in the back of my head. And then in my 20s, I got really into fly fishing and started traveling all over the country and doing some exotic locations to try catching fish on the fly. But ultimately I've decided, after my time in the Marine Corps, we moved back here. It's a good time to get the guiding business started. And we opened up in 2016, and we've been, pretty much guiding, or I've been guiding full time ever since. So
That's awesome. That's definitely a dream come true.
yeah, it's been a ride, man. It's been a ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said, started as a kid. At what age did you actually start guiding though?
Oh, just 5 years ago,
Oh,
2016.
okay. That's when you officially started guiding. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And I heard about you guys through Rob because he did some of the logo work with you guys. And I actually heard of you through, Dustin McGrath actually is who I
Yeah.
originally heard you from. Uh, and he showed me you guys, and I started watching your YouTube videos and looking at your Instagram. And I'm like, all right, this is pretty sick. I loved your guys' YouTube series. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was fun.
and then I've seen you out on the water, and like your boat is impossible to miss, which I think is absolutely awesome. Like I'll be up on the upper river, and I see this red dragon just go by my head, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was Brook Dog. And then
Yeah,
I
man.
on the river.
Rob did a good job on that design,
Yeah,
and Streamline Designs did an awesome installation. And the cool thing about wraps, man, is I mean, you can change them out every 4 or 5 years or so, and they're relatively inexpensive. I mean, the whole project was a little bit over $1,000, like,
yeah, that's
and
awesome.
to protect the value of your boat and get like something custom like that on it,
Yeah,
I just think is sweet. And
yeah.
if I can honor, the fishery through all the different like local imagery and stuff for local icons on there, I just think that's interesting. So like it'll be like every 4 years or so, I'm just going to get a new wrap done because I just think it's cool, man. You can always just take it off and swap it out and
Yeah.
create a new look.
So as you've been fishing throughout your life, what kind of pulled you into certain species? Were you always just off the bat just a multi-species kind of I'll fish for anything, or did you gravitate towards certain species at certain times?
Yeah. So it's an awesome question, man, because like the honest, like to the heart answer to your question is I just like fishing for native fish.
Okay.
So wherever I am, I don't care like what state it is or what country I'm in, my preference would be to fish for natives. Like,
Okay.
and I think, I've blogged about this before. Like, there's just something that feels a little bit more primordial about like connecting to something that's been there since probably before humans were there,
Oh yeah.
like in that spot. So, or at least connected to it. Like, all of our bass around here, for example, and the walleyes and the muskies and the northern pike, like those fish have been here, the lake trout, they've been here since the last ice age, man. So like those are just super interesting fish to me here. The steelhead and the kings and the brown trout, they're cool, but they're like mining the gaps of when the natives are slow for me. And it's been that way. Like that's how I feel about guiding and here locally. But no matter where I go, if I go to Virginia, I want to fish for brook trout. If I go to North Carolina, I want to do coastal stuff. Like just try to go wherever the native fish are. And there's fun stuff to be done with stocked and wild fish as well. But I prefer fishing for natives, in a place that they've been in for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome for sure. And you never, at least I never really think about that aspect of like I'm fishing for a species who has been here for so long. It's insane.
Yeah, man. Well, what the reason why that's important is because you start to think of those fish as like herd, almost like herd animals,
Okay.
but where they live is like the Great Lakes ecosystem is a massive like plain, like there's it's super nutrient rich. There's a lot going on for at least the fish that are around. There's big forage bases. I mean, they're really complicated ecosystems, but if you think of it like that, it's wild because they behave in a way that is very, very different from like if you were to go fish the James River in Virginia or fish like the Menominee in the Upper Peninsula, like a lot of the smaller creeks where you can't take a motorized boat, like the bass behave very different in those types of waters than they do in our area, where they've been just grazing on the bottom for like just picking off stuff because there's just so much life in those rocks that they can just chill and do that all the time. And they don't have to burn a lot of calories doing it and they just get huge.
Yeah.
So.
And that's something that you mentioned I'm looking forward to. I got my trip coming up to Virginia. I eventually want to get down to Florida, and I want to go all over the country to, I'm more of a bass guy, but I want to get all over the country to catch bass. And the way they behave, like you mentioned, in general, bass are bass. They're largemouth are, they're going to behave somewhat the same. But when you go to different states, the way they set up at times of year, times of the year, the lure they want, stuff like that, I think is super interesting because although you might be fishing, say, 6 foot of water in New York for a bass at one point, and then you're going to be fishing 6 foot in Florida, it's going to be a completely different, way to approach it.
Oh yeah, dude. And like one of the things that would be really like a sick thing to do. It's like my personal goal, like my kind of like side goal that I have going on in life is I want to fish all 50 states before I turn 50. And I'm 42. I've done lots of states, man. Like 40, I think I've done 43 or 44 states so far. But where I go, like when I'm traveling around, I'm trying to fish for natives in all these states. And what a really cool thing to do, like after I'm done finishing that goal, what I want to do is start in Florida and just fish pre-spawn all the way up, back to here. Because then you could see how all these different fish respond in different ecosystems and where they're actually from. It's that's where I think it's really cool just to see how all those different organisms adapt to the different places that they hang out. Like they're especially bass, man. They're such a versatile creature. Like they're without a doubt, hands down, my favorite fish.
Yeah.
Just because they can adapt to all types of environments, and they're awesome like that, man.
Yeah, and something that I think especially, I don't have much experience fishing for smallmouth anywhere other than New York, but I think it's awesome that, I've found on the upper Niagara and, on the St. Lawrence, and then the middle of summer, for some reason, there will always be some smallmouth that are up shallow. it boggles my mind because, you know, you're always thinking hot summertime, you want to target them deep, but you'll be fishing shallow, and somehow, you know, like I've been catching them on, or I've caught them on a chatterbait and, you know, a few feet of water up on the river in the middle of summer, to where, you know, I would be like, you know, only largemouth would do that, but a smallmouth being up there, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the summertime is definitely the time for experimenting with weird stuff, because you
Yeah.
end up like, once you get past post spawn, like there's that sweet period that happens like towards the end of June and into like, you know, the first kind of couple of weeks of July. It's really, really good when they get off beds.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into that like mid to late summer pattern where, you know, they could just be anywhere, just loafing, and, you know, you just got to cover water, man. That's all you can do, is just cover water and look for patterns as best as you can, and like, don't stick around in a certain area. I just cover the hell out of water, and you know, if I got to burn through baits to do it, that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always got to be on the move, trying to see where they're at, because,
Yeah.
like you said, they're just everywhere in the summer. You know, you'll catch them 35 feet, you can catch them in 6 feet. It's kind of strange, but
Yeah.
so as you've said, you fished all over the country, and where, if you haven't been, because you said you want to get all 50 states, where would be your dream place to fish, and for what species, and so on?
I mean, like a real cheese answer to that would be 200 years ago here. You know, that I think about that all the time, man. I think about that all the time. Like, I think it would be mind blowing to see what this place, like what it used to be like.
Yeah.
But honestly, man, like it like I clients of mine ask me that question all the time when, you know, when they, because we'll have this get to know you discussion, and it always comes out where like, I like to travel, like I like moving to different places, learning from other guides, seeing how to pursue our query in different places, like just keeping my brain wired fresh for that pursuit. But what it really comes down to is like, when I try to answer that question, I say there's 4 seasons of the year, and I would be in 4 different places in the country, you know, like one per season. And I will put like Buffalo, New York, between like the last, really like all of April to about Memorial Day weekend. I will put that window of action here against anywhere on the planet, as far as fishing goes, because like there's just so much. And so for me, it's not the pursuit of a singular fish. I mean, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it would be finesse fishing, smallmouth bass, upper Niagara.
Yeah.
Like that would be, you know, if that can entertain me endlessly, day in and day out, I could do that all day. There's just something about the touch, you know. I guess I'm like, you know, more sensitive to touch. I just like the feel of the bottom. I like to just feel the slight pickup. You know, I like the idea that you got to be on your game. You're just, it's like kind of like a blue heron on the banks, just waiting to grab a bait fish. You know, like that's how it feels to me. Now, don't get me wrong, like in you know, pre-spawn ripping crankbaits and blade baits is a blast, you know, but it only lasts for a few weeks, and then if you can finesse fish, that will get you through all of the year.
Yeah.
And that's how I would prefer to do it. But I like to think of, when people ask me that, the question that you asked me is, I like to think of a specific window. And here I would put that April to, you know, Memorial Day weekend against anywhere on the planet, just because there's so much happening.
Yeah.
You know, and then in late summertime, like August or something like that, I'd be out west, you know, fishing for cutthroat trout in the mountains, you know, on hoppers or something like that, you know, and then, but then in the fall, same thing, man, like November, end of October, all the way through the middle of December, you know, I would put this place against a lot of places, man. I mean, between kings, steelhead, lake trout, brown trout, and bass all in that window, there's a lot going on. So
Oh, yeah.
like for me, you can keep yourself entertained for 2 straight months of going after different stuff,
Mhm.
like every time that you go out, so
Yeah.
I don't, I'm hard to, I don't have a lot of patience, like people people say if you're at least that's what we were taught when we were kids, right? Like you can't be a good angler if you're not patient.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's some virtue to that, but like for me, not as a guide, man. Like you got to be in the action. There's just a lot more pressure, and same thing if you're tournament fishing, like there's a lot more pressure there for you to figure out the pattern quickly, and that's why I like doing it. Like without, and so for me, like what keeps me engaged is if one thing isn't working and I can experiment with another thing, or if there's one species of fish that's not on, but I can go after another one. Now I can bounce around and just constantly stay engaged and do different stuff, and that's the most important thing. For me, it's just keeping the action pretty consistent.
Mhm. And I think that's pretty neat because I never really target any other species besides bass and steelhead, and when you catch that muskie while you're bass fishing, or you catch that walleye, it's cool. But when you are specifically going out of your way to target all these different species, you have a whole more, or a whole different idea of the whole ecosystem, how it's working. So you have to have a lot more knowledge on the patterns of all these different fish versus just one when you're
Yeah, well,
yeah.
but honestly, man, it's that's not anything. That's not rocket science. There's it's all really public knowledge. That, like, for me, like just like you, I pretty much, like, I will have a significant portion of my schedule dedicated to bass from mid-March till mid-November or mid-October, right? So that's a huge chunk of the year that's dedicated to bass. Now, sure, there'll be like king salmon trips and a couple of walleye trips and some steelhead trips like earlier in the spring, like in the March, April timeframe. There'll be some, maybe a couple dozen. But and then from there into the end of the summertime, there'll be some other stuff, but it's mostly bass. So the wintertime, if you want to stay engaged, like the main game is the lower Niagara. And you just got to spend a ton of time down there and just figure out the currents.
Mhm.
And once you figure that out, I mean, if you know how to drop shot in current in like the upper, like if you can drop shot in current in the upper Niagara and not break off consistently,
Yeah.
then you can figure it out down there. Like, and that's, and if you're looking for another option for something to stay engaged in the winter, I mean, that's the heart of the technique. I mean, sure, the rigs are different, but the concept, like the angle and the physics, are the same.
Yeah.
You just got to understand how to deal with far more complex currents and stuff like that. But once you do, you can definitely stay engaged doing it, and you can cover those gaps where the bass fishing is, not all that great. And honestly, like if it was good during the winter, I like the fact that I give them a break. You know,
Yeah.
um, I like like when I catch that first bass of this year, like I kiss that fish every time, man. Like I'm super stoked
Yeah.
that I don't care what the size is, man. When that first one happens, I'm pumped. And it's tough for me to fish for anything else after that first one. But I usually like wait till
Mhm.
mid March till I do it, because I know once I go there, it's like I'm not going to want to come
Yeah.
back from.
Yeah. Very, very addicting, especially when you're on those smallies, not like consistently. It's just nothing better than it. It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
So, the kind of heart of the episode I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously this time of year is more steelhead driven, but what is your favorite setup for steelhead fishing? If you had to pick one, like, your go-to every time, what would that be?
Yeah, it's just a So everybody who fishes the lower Niagara for steelhead from, at a minimum, from Art Park up, uses a three-way swivel
Mm-hmm.
with a dropper weight. So your kind of basis for the angle is a three-way swivel and a dropper weight, usually about 1 3/4 ounces to 2 ounces, right? Because just that's what's required to get through the current. Now, as far as the leader goes and what you're actually presenting to the fish off of the other end of the three-way swivel, that's where it varies between guides. So some guys use egg sacs, some guys use live bait like minnows. What I use is kind of like it's a double snelled hook rig. So the bottom hook has got a Mr. Twister on it, and then about a forearm's length up, there's another snelled hook, and then a pegged bead, and then another kind of 5 feet of leader tied to the three-way swivel, and that's it. It's just a tandem rig.
Okay.
And what that does is it just offers the two things that all the fish down there are eating. They're either eating the eggs that are rolling downstream off of a red, or they're eating, a smelt or emerald shiner or some other bait fish that died coming over the dam, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why all those birds are there too, because those birds are there because there's smelt, there's emeralds, and then a lot of bait dies coming through the turbines of the dam. They die coming down the rapids of the lower, and it's just a huge assembly. It's like a huge conveyor belt of food, and that's why all those gulls are there all the time. There's just so much food. I mean, you just sit there and watch gulls pick off food all day long, and that's steelhead are underwater doing the same thing.
Yeah.
The challenge with fishing all of the lower Niagara, and the reason why everybody uses that rig, is because that is the only way that you can reliably stay in the strike zone. Just the current moves in all types of weird directions. The depth is constantly changing. You can certainly float fish. There's lots of guys that float fish, but you want to use floats in certain areas where you have a lot more control of the current, and you know that the depth is going to be universal. And that's a lot of fun when you can do that, but it also requires really good water clarity, but it requires a captain with great boat control. It requires a stretch of water where the depth isn't going to change a lot.
Yeah.
And it requires guys that know how to work those rigs. If you got that, then it can be an effective and fun way of doing it. But for me, I like the bottom bouncing that off the three-way rig, because it's super sensitive. You can feel everything. It's just like finesse fishing in like the upper Niagara when you're twitching neds or drop shotting through rocks or whatever. It's the same type of concept. You're just kind of like a puppeteer, just dancing that weight off the bottom and feeling it. And that leader just shoots out, and you can just feel, because it's all fluoro and braid, you can just feel everything that happens. As soon as that hit happens, you can feel it. It's super sensitive. It's game on. So it's either a bead or a Mr. Twister type of thing. And some guys use eggs and other guys use live bait. All of it works. It's just, for me, that rig is super simple. It gives me two options. I can pre-tie a bunch of them, and it just keeps it simple for me.
Yeah. This year or next year, I definitely want to get into fishing for steelhead off the boat in the lower, because, I creek walk and stuff like that. And it's just a lot of the places, it's just, it's a shit show, to be quite fair, a lot of the times. And it's too many people. So when you can get out on the water in the boat and get away from everyone, that's definitely an advantage, I think.
Yeah, man. And like the other thing too that I see a lot of guys, a lot of bass anglers doing, is if you got the right lake for it, like if Lake Ontario's pretty calm, you could go out and like vertical jig on the bar, and it's the same way that you would vertical jig like a blade bait for bass, or or if you were to just vertical jig in general with the swim bait or something like that. Instead of catching bass, you'll catch lake trout and brown trout. But you can, which is sick. I mean, you got to up your tackle strength and all that stuff. But the platform that you have that you normally use to like in that same location,
Hmm.
you know, in the fall, you'll do the same thing that you're doing, like that you do in the fall for bass,
Yeah.
in the same exact spot, presenting baits the same exact way, except you'll just catch brown trout and lake trout, and every once in a while steelhead. And then when you get into the spring, there's a good chance of you catching a king doing it too.
Yeah.
So, you know, just keep doing what you normally do. Like if you were going to go fish the bar or fish the lower for bass, just up your tackle, but you could use
Okay.
the same baits and everything, man, and you'll catch fish.
That's sweet. That's awesome. It's definitely a goal of mine. I have never caught a lake trout yet, so it's on my list of things to do. I've only really been steelhead fishing for the last like 3 or 4 years, or like trout fishing in general, and it's definitely on my list. I got to get one this year. It's got to happen. But
Yeah, it's there's a lot of them there, man. I mean, the thing about this time of year in particular, like February, is I mean, fishing's always, you know, like you never know what's going to happen. It's not like you can predict it, but you know, there's always some gamble involved. So there are anomalies, but particularly this time of year when it comes to steelhead fishing, it is one of those situations where like you just don't know what's going to happen. Even if like all the conditions line up perfectly, like you got good current, good watercolor, you know, like there isn't a lot of wind blowing, like as long you could have all those conditions lined up because that's all you really care about. Air temperature doesn't make a huge difference. It could be super cold.
yeah.
As long as you got sun out and the wind's not blowing and the water's not dirty, you're gonna catch fish, right? So the if you can do that, um, you're what you need to figure out when you go out there is what size of bait the fish are actually going to respond to. And they might not respond to anything. You could spend the entire day experimenting with different bead sizes, fishing egg sacs, fishing live bait. They might not respond to anything. Like it's totally random what happens in like the end of January, beginning of February. And my theory about that is that there's like a bell curve of the steelhead run, right? Like it starts where the fish will start running in October, and then it just kind of peaks in mid-November, mid to late November, and goes and like the hump kind of carries over into mid-December, and then starts to level off late December into early January, right? So,
Okay.
like right now, we're at the point where we're just getting trickles, if any, new fish in the river,
Okay.
right? So, and the reason why that's important is because that means that the bulk of the fish that are in the river right now have been fished to. Lots of them have been caught.
Yeah.
And lots of them have been caught and handled poorly and died. Lots of them have been harvested
Yeah.
and have been taken out. So like this is that time where the population of the fish is kind of like they're there, they're wary, they're a little bit smarter, they've been beat up, some have been taken out, so it's in flux.
Mm.
Some days you'll go out there, it'll be freaking magical, man. You'll catch tons. Like last week, you know, Monday and Wednesday was insane, and then Sunday was like a total grind, and I heard Saturday was too. And that's how this is going to be. But then when we get into March, everything's going to start getting that. There's a new bell curve because another run of fish comes in, and then that'll peak out towards the end of March, beginning of April for steelhead. But then after that, like all hell breaks loose because then kings are starting to happen, and then more and more lake trout are around, and then bass start getting on pre-spawn, and it's like now what like what are we gonna fish for now, man? Like you know what do you want to do? It's I don't know. I get excited thinking about it. You know, so we only really have like a month of weirdness. You know,
Yeah.
we got a month of weirdness in front of us, and I don't know. We'll get through it. It'll be
Yeah.
good.
Exactly. I got to get out more steelhead fishing. I've just been kind of lazy this year for no good reason, but I got to get out steelhead fishing a lot more. You know, compared to last year, I was going out like 10 straight days in a row and loving life. But yeah, I got to get back out there a little bit more. I'm a little out of touch with the whole fishing side of things.
Yeah, I'd be happy to show you some things, man. It's It just takes practice.
Yeah.
The rig, getting it to where it needs to be is the easy part, like just the finesse of it, the timing, all of that. That's what takes practice and volume. But like the tackle and all that, none of that's complicated. The rigs that like the fish don't get much time to study stuff in that kind of current. So
Oh, for sure.
they tend to hammer it. So it's just, can you present the bait well? And that's, you just got to get out there and practice it. And I could definitely show you a thing or two.
Yeah, I'd be down. That'd be awesome, man. So then, we're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but I had a few last questions to kind of wrap up the show here.
Cool.
They're just a little, kind of interesting questions to think about. The first one is, it's kind of funny, but what is your favorite snack on the water? Because obviously,
Yeah, I saw that. That's an awesome question, man. And here's the thing, dude. Like, now I don't know if I would recommend this to anybody else, man, but I don't eat. Like, I don't eat at all until usually around like at the earliest 5:30, 6 o'clock p.m. Like so I don't eat at all. I don't care how hot it is, how cold it is. In the summertime, I drink, plenty of water when I'm out there. But like, I don't eat because I feel like I'm far more stable if I don't put food into me at the beginning of the day. I just feel like if I eat breakfast, then by the middle of the day, I'm like, I have to answer a question like, what's my favorite snack?
Yeah.
Like, because then I would feel like I need to graze.
Yeah.
And if I don't eat at all until the end of the day, I'm entirely stable. I'm level. I can stay focused. I don't get like low blood sugar or anything like that. So, short answer is I don't eat, man. I don't eat when I'm on the water.
Do you do coffee at least?
In the morning, but when I'm on the boat, unless it's like, even in the summertime, I drink about a gallon of water while I'm out there.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, I drink a half a gallon of water before I get on the water.
Okay.
But I don't drink anything when I'm on the boat in the wintertime because I don't want to drink coffee because I don't want to have to pee a bunch.
Yeah.
And I don't want to drink anything cold because that'll just lower my core temperature while I'm out there and make me colder. So I just hydrate like crazy before I go out in the morning. And then, sure, I'll piss like 2 or 3 times when I first get on the water, but then I'm done. Yeah. And then I just stay level for the rest of the day. Yeah. But I only drink coffee like first thing in the morning, man. I drink a full French press full of coffee, but after I leave the house, I don't anymore.
Gotcha. So the next question is, do you have any tips for staying positive on the water? And now, I originally formulated this question more so around tournament fishing, but I think the same thing applies, just for fun fishing or obviously guided trips. It must be, you must have those days where things aren't going right. How do you kind of deal with that and stay positive throughout it all?
I mean, the simplest thing that I could say is it's like the old cliche. Like, I mean, you could be inside,
yeah,
like doing like staring at a computer screen or something like that. Instead, you're out, so I as a guide, I try to make it more about the actual act of catching fish. Cause honestly, man, like you're going to catch something, man. Like the Niagara is a very bountiful place. Like, you're going to catch, something's going to happen. There's absolutely days where it's a grind, but like skunking, unless you're musky fishing, just doesn't really happen, man. Yeah. So like for me, I try to make it more about connecting to the region, like getting people to understand like the geology, like, the history of the place, like the ecosystem. And like, that's what I try to focus on. So I just keep a conversation going. But if you're out like fun fishing, for me, I would just kind of treat any time that you're going fishing, just be stoked that you're out and that you get to do it. Because if you start allowing it to get in your head, where you're getting angry and frustrated, then you should probably ask yourself what the hell you're doing out there, man. That doesn't make it. There's no place for getting angry or upset or agitated in fishing. To me, it's just those two things are irreconcilable. Like I can understand like being heartbroken after losing a fish, or if if you keep getting snagged and you're having a hard time learning something and you're getting, that's getting into your head. Okay, there's kind of a prideful like, okay, I don't want to keep messing up. I got that level of frustration. But if you're just out there pissed because the action's slow,
Yeah.
you're just missing the point, man. You're missing the point, and it's there's you just need to recenter yourself, like take a deep breath and get it together, and just be thankful for the fact that you're able to float down a river, and you have an ecosystem that in all likelihood is going to produce something. And I would think the same thing if you're a tournament angler, man. Like, just be thankful for the fact that you're in like a cool place competing or getting to do what you love, and like somewhere else, and being able to explore new places and meet new people. And sure, I'm betting the tournament circuit's got people with huge egos. I mean, around here, the guiding community definitely doesn't have that. Like, I think the guiding community here is very fraternal. Like, there's a lot of really good dudes.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the tournament circuit's like. I mean, there's a little bit more competitive part of that, but still, you get to meet like all types of cool people.
Yeah.
So and you get to see cool things and go to new places. Like, just be thankful. Don't let it get in your head. It's because if you end up frustrated while fishing, you just caught a mind virus, man.
Yeah.
So just drink some water, breathe it out, and center yourself. That's about as long-winded, I know, but that's how I think about it, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for answering that. And this one just kind of popped in my head, but so you've probably had customers that you've guided for from all over the place. What is the weirdest place that someone has come all the way from to have you guide for them?
Australia.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, dude. But here's the thing, man. Like, you got to think about, and people that are from here and live here don't really think about this all that often. But like, Niagara Falls is like a global attraction.
That's true.
So so like, I've had people from, I mean, Australia is just the first thing that popped into my head, but definitely people from like all over, Mexico, all over the United States. I don't think there's a state that I haven't had a client from yet. Canada, a couple people from different countries in South America. Like, this is all obviously prior to COVID.
Yeah.
Some dude from Italy. Like, I mean, yeah, man. It's just because people will come here, and that's like a lot of our summer business here are people that come to visit Niagara Falls, realize that okay, well, you're here, you probably want to spend at least 4 days on the ground, but you can only really, like, you could see all of Niagara Falls pretty easily in 2 days. If you went hard, you could do it in a day. So people will realize, like, okay, well, I got 2 other days. What else can we do? They'll start Googling around things to do. Oh, we could go fishing. Yeah. And so they'll book trips. And that's a lot of like summer business, is just people randomly like, well, what else can I do? I'm here seeing Niagara Falls. So I all different, like, the entire spectrum of human being is I've guided, man. And it's all of them are just a lot of fun, man. It's always a blast.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up the podcast here. Thank you for being on today. We definitely talked about something that I haven't really touched on the show, and that is fishing for other species besides bass. And I think that there's a lot of information to be had out there for new steelhead anglers that, everyone can learn a little bit. When I started, I didn't have really any teachers. We kind of just didn't know what we were doing. So I hope that we provided some information for some people so they, shorten that learning curve a little bit for them when they start into steelhead fishing. But thank you for being on. Everyone, stay tuned for episode number 29 of the JD Outdoors podcast, coming soon. And as usual, it's brought to you by Woo Tunston, X Zone Lures, and JD Outdoors Lure Co.